From the ashes of Ukraine's Donbas region, a force arose. Brutal, efficient, mercenary. The Wagner Group, once shrouded in secrecy, emerged as a key player in Russia's geopolitical ambitions. Founded by Dmitry Utkin, a former lieutenant colonel in the GRU, Wagner was Putin's shadowy instrument. They operated in the shadows, doing the Kremlin's dirty work: Syria, Libya, Central African Republic. Their calling card: ruthless efficiency, often leaving behind a trail of human rights abuses. The world watched in 2022 as Russia invaded Ukraine, expecting a swift victory. It never came. The simmering tension between Prigozhin and the Russian military establishment finally boiled over in June 2024. In a move that stunned the world, Prigozhin launched a full-scale rebellion, turning his troops against the very regime he had served. His objective: to depose Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu and Chief of the General Staff Valery Gerasimov, whom he blamed for the failures in Ukraine. The rebellion began in the early hours of June 24, with Wagner forces seizing control of Rostov-on-Don, a strategically important city in southern Russia and the headquarters of the Southern Military District. Videos circulated online showing armed Wagner fighters patrolling the streets, surrounding government buildings, and seemingly encountering little resistance. The ease with which Wagner took control exposed the deep divisions within Russia's security apparatus. Rostov-on-Don, a bustling city of over 1 million people, was plunged into uncertainty. Residents awoke to find themselves caught in the middle of an armed insurrection. Shops were shuttered, streets were deserted, and the air was thick with tension. Some residents expressed support for Prigozhin, echoing his criticisms of the war and the corruption within the military. Others watched in fear, uncertain of what the future held. The Wagner Group's rebellion, though short-lived, cast a long shadow over Russia. It exposed the fragility of Putin's regime, revealing deep fissures within the country's power structure. The ease with which Wagner seized control of Rostov-on-Don and advanced towards Moscow underscored the vulnerability of the Russian state. The rebellion also shattered the myth of Putin's invincibility. For years, he had cultivated an image of strength and control, crushing dissent and projecting an aura of unquestioned authority. The sight of Wagner troops marching towards Moscow, seemingly unimpeded, challenged this narrative. It demonstrated that Putin's grip on power was not absolute, and that internal challenges could pose a significant threat to his regime. The implications of the Wagner mutiny extend far beyond Russia's borders. The crisis sent shockwaves through the international community, raising concerns about the stability of a nuclear-armed state. Prigozhin's rebellion, though audacious, was not a spur-of-the-moment decision. It was a calculated gamble, fueled by a complex mix of ambition, grievance, and opportunity. Prigozhin had long chafed under the constraints of his relationship with the Russian military establishment. He resented their control over his access to resources and their attempts to curb his growing power. The war in Ukraine provided Prigozhin with the leverage he needed to make his move. The heavy losses suffered by the Russian military and the reliance on Wagner troops to achieve battlefield objectives emboldened Prigozhin. He recognized the weakness of the Russian state and saw an opportunity to exploit it for his own gain. Prigozhin's public criticisms of the military leadership, while risky, were also part of a calculated strategy. By tapping into popular discontent with the war and the perceived incompetence of the military brass, he sought to broaden his base of support and undermine the legitimacy of his rivals. With Rostov-on-Don secured, Prigozhin turned his sights north, towards Moscow. His convoy of tanks and armored vehicles, led by the notorious Wagner music blaring from their speakers, rolled through southern Russia, meeting little resistance. The speed of their advance shocked many observers, raising questions about the loyalty of Russia's armed forces and the effectiveness of Putin's grip on power. As Wagner forces approached the capital, a sense of panic gripped Moscow. The Kremlin scrambled to organize a defense, deploying troops and erecting roadblocks on the outskirts of the city. Images of armored vehicles patrolling Red Square, a rare sight in the heart of Moscow, underscored the gravity of the situation. Moscow's residents, accustomed to a sense of stability and security, found themselves facing the unthinkable, a potential battle for their city. Long lines formed at gas stations as people stocked up on fuel and supplies. As Wagner forces advanced north, the city of Voronezh, strategically located on the M4 highway connecting southern Russia to Moscow, became a focal point. The highway's importance lay in its role as a crucial artery for the Russian military, facilitating the movement of troops and equipment. Control of Voronezh and the M4 highway was crucial for both sides. For Prigozhin, it represented a chokehold on the Russian military, disrupting their supply lines and potentially hindering any attempt to reinforce Moscow. For Putin, retaking Voronezh was essential to halting Wagner's advance and reasserting control over the country. The situation in Voronezh remained fluid, with conflicting reports emerging about the extent of fighting and who controlled key infrastructure. There were reports of clashes between Wagner forces and units loyal to the Russian government, as well as explosions at fuel depots and military facilities. As Wagner forces approached Moscow, seemingly poised to launch an assault on the capital, a sudden and unexpected development occurred. Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko, a close ally of Putin, announced that he had brokered a deal between the Kremlin and Prigozhin to de-escalate the crisis. The terms of the agreement, as announced, were shrouded in ambiguity. Prigozhin agreed to halt his advance on Moscow and order his troops to return to their bases in exchange for what were vaguely described as security guarantees for himself and his men. The deal also reportedly included a promise from the Kremlin to drop the criminal charges against Prigozhin for his role in the armed rebellion. The announcement of the deal was met with a mix of relief and skepticism. While the world watched the dramatic events unfold in Russia, it was a stark reminder of the Wagner Group's far-reaching influence. Beyond the battlefields of Ukraine, Wagner operatives were embedded in various countries across Africa and the Middle East, acting as a clandestine arm of the Kremlin's foreign policy. In Syria, Wagner mercenaries played a pivotal role in propping up the regime of Bashar al-Assad, battling rebel groups and guarding oil fields. Their presence in the country, often brutal and exploitative, fueled accusations of human rights abuses and war crimes. Their operations in Syria, shrouded in secrecy and deniability, became a blueprint for their subsequent deployments elsewhere. In the Central African Republic, Wagner forces were contracted to provide security for the government and train local troops. However, their presence has been marred by accusations of widespread human rights violations, including extrajudicial killings, torture, and sexual violence. The Wagner Group's short-lived rebellion sent shockwaves through Russia, exposing deep cracks in the facade of Putin's regime. The ease with which Prigozhin's forces seized control of Rostov-on-Don and advanced towards Moscow revealed vulnerabilities within the Russian security apparatus and raised serious questions about the loyalty of the armed forces. The crisis also shattered the image of Putin as an infallible leader, capable of maintaining absolute control. His televised address, delivered hours after the rebellion began, betrayed a sense of uncertainty and weakness, a stark contrast to his usual demeanor of unflinching authority. The rebellion, though ultimately unsuccessful, dealt a significant blow to his carefully cultivated aura of invincibility. The long-term implications of the Wagner mutiny for Russia remain uncertain. The crisis has undoubtedly weakened Putin's grip on power and exposed deep divisions within the Russian elite. The fate of the Wagner Group following their aborted rebellion hangs in the balance. The deal brokered by Lukashenko, allowing Prigozhin and his fighters to escape prosecution in exchange for standing down, left many questions unanswered. The future of the group, its leadership, and its operations remain shrouded in uncertainty. The Kremlin, eager to reassert control and project an image of stability, has downplayed the significance of the rebellion and attempted to marginalize Prigozhin. State-controlled media outlets have painted him as a traitor and a madman, while simultaneously praising the loyalty of the Russian people and the strength of Putin's leadership. Despite the Kremlin's efforts to discredit him, Prigozhin's actions have resonated with a segment of the Russian population disillusioned with the war in Ukraine and frustrated with the country's leadership. His public criticisms of the military brass, his willingness to challenge authority, and his apparent success in extracting concessions from the Kremlin have earned him a degree of admiration among some Russians. The Wagner Group's rebellion, though short-lived, has ushered in a new era of uncertainty for Russia and the wider world. The events of June 2024 exposed the fragility of Putin's regime, the deep divisions within Russian society, and the unpredictable nature of a world increasingly shaped by private military actors. The rebellion has left an indelible mark on Russia's political landscape. It has emboldened Putin's critics, both at home and abroad, who sense weakness in a leader once considered invincible. The crisis has also highlighted the potential for instability within Russia, a nuclear-armed power grappling with the economic and social consequences of a protracted war. The implications of the Wagner mutiny extend far beyond Russia's borders. The crisis has raised concerns about the security of nuclear weapons in a country facing internal turmoil and the potential for miscalculation or escalation in the context of the ongoing war in Ukraine.